Who I am someone who uses they them pronouns. I am someone who is confused about gender all the time. I am someone who is just confused in general.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I work here at the Office of Student Life at Kriya University. I'm also visiting faculty who teaches philosophy, and I've been here at Kriya for give or take less than a year. And I am from a small town called Wellington. It's in the Nilgiri Hills.
Um, okay. Hi, my name is Harini Bhatia. I'm a third year, currently majoring in psychology. So, on the spectrum of sexuality, I identify as pansexual.
So, hi, I'm Prisha. I'm 17. I identify as someone who is asexual, someone who doesn't really identify with any gender as such.
I am a student here, and I do not identify myself from the community, but I am an ally, I'm a supporter of the community, but like don't specifically like my sexual preferences do not fall in that category.
And would you call yourself a heterosexual?
Yes.
Cis heterosexual?
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay.
Hi, I'm Das. I'm from Bangalore. I identify as gender fluid. And my pronouns are he and she. I came to know that I'm queer when I was 12, and now here I am. So yeah, that's been great.
Hi, I'm Amanjeet. I joined Kriya University last year to set up the Inclusive Learning Support Office, which is essentially a office that was meant to support students with disabilities, to support students coming from different backgrounds, essentially trying to make Kriya a space wherein people, regardless of their caste, gender, class, caste, sexual orientation, or any form of diversity, could, thrive and find an environment where they feel supported. But essentially, in the last 1 year, it has evolved to take on different roles. And now I'm currently the director of student services at Kriya and also overseeing student life and ILS both.
I see.
I don't know who I am actually. Yeah, actually, that's my introduction. I'm not quite sure who I am. There are so many labels and so many identities and so many feelings, and there is so much all the time. And it's hard to pinpoint on who you are.
I would like to I just googled queer plus etymology to understand what queerness is, and this is from the website of La Trobe University, and I'm going to read out what is explained as queer there. Queer is a word of uncertain origin that had entered the English language by the early 16th century, when it was primarily used to mean strange, odd, peculiar, or eccentric. By the late century, it was being used colloquially to refer to same-sex attracted men. So that is the definition that I read out. And my focus when you asked me, I was thrilled when you asked me if you could speak about queerness to you, because I would like to speak about the older definition of what it means to be queer. For me, queer is about being different. It's not about being this or being that. And being peculiar, being eccentric. We live in a society, and much has been written about the masses. Much has been written about, belonging. And belonging means to the masses. And for me, queerness is about what does it mean not to belong. And no matter how much you create an organization, you create committees, you create people, groups activating for this, for me, what makes queerness queer is the fact of not belonging, and something that I have accepted deeply.
Something that I recently found out about my school, that people were not comfortable discussing their sexuality in school. And for them, it was the fact that I would try to hide if someone was belonging to the LGBTQ community. They wouldn't like to share that with their peers. So now that 2 years has passed, still like till school has and till we graduated from school. So now I'm seeing my friends telling me, okay, so like I thought I was belonging to that community, but I was never too sure. Like I never could look up to people and I couldn't seek help or something like that. And to a very great extent, colleges have been those places for them to explore themselves. Even though like the same city wouldn't have been the preference or couldn't have given them the resources, other universities and other cities have provided that comparative exposure.
There's no words to use at the start because you don't know what words to use. It's not vocabulary that is openly available. When the vocabulary is openly available, it is so in a negative light, in the form of bullying, where you see people tease or bully people with gay, trans. It's just so difficult to understand yourself because of these things.
They used to call me names, they used to call me gay. Used to be such a huge slur. And whenever someone used the word gay, they used to laugh at
I
it.
think there was a lot of like expectations on gender roles there, like stereotypical gender roles in my old school.
I was really feminine. There was a lot of hand movements, and I never really seen to the boys when they were talking about they were rating girls or something very heteronormative, and I didn't really fit in the things.
Because I remember this one time in fifth grade or sixth grade, only the girls were told to stay back in for the after the assembly, and they said, girls should always sit respectfully in class because you should present yourself in a very neat and tidy way. You shouldn't sit with your legs spread apart, especially because you're growing adults now. And yeah, that's something that really sticks out gender-wise. A lot of times, either teachers or the administration management themselves, they tend to enforce a lot of like very gender stereotypical ways of behaving in school.
While teaching something, I don't remember what it was, he was very focused and emphasized on the fact that there were like two genders and only two genders, and that sexuality was not something that kids or people above, like people below the age of 26 should even think about. Like it was very much like you're a child, you don't know anything and you don't need this, and you have no, like, this has no value for you until you're 26, and then it has value for you for 3 years where you have sex and you make babies and you procreate, and then you're done with it, and then it's not important to you again.
As a student, yes, definitely, because that was also the time that I was not at all out to anyone. Like, there was this constant fear of being found out and then being discriminated against, even by my classmates, friends, etc., because I had no idea how they would react to this news.
My family is fairly rightist.
And I've seen it with my friends, and like just the conversations that like your parents, the people that raised you, like are not supportive of who you love is like, it's very close to home because I had it with other members of family, because I thought, oh, if I can tell my mom, then I can tell maybe one level higher and tell my grandma, and that was just terrible. So it's just no. So I'm very, very glad and very lucky that my mother was indifferent.
My parents are like liberal and open minded and everything, but it's not something that every parent wants to say discuss with their child.
Numerous cab drivers I've talked to, the numerous auto walas and all these people, they are more or less agnostic towards it or ambivalent towards it, unless they are like hardcore nationalists or like hardcore right wing people. They do not have any problem. Like, they won't want their kid to be, or like they do not want anyone they know to be a part of the community, but they're fine with the existence of it.
And my mom is also, she's a BJP influencer online. So you get the idea of how she is, right?
Being content in your individuality, being content in knowing who you are, maybe the world will never accept you. There's always going to be some kind of, they'll want you to be this way, including from your parents to even the closest ones in your life. They'll have a image of you, and again comes back to image and having an image and appearance and image. So there's always going to be this image game that you have to bind by, but you actually deeply down inside know that nobody's going to fully understand you, nobody's going to fully accept you, and you want to be comfortable with that. And I think that is knowing the essence of being queer.
I came out to my mom, and her first reaction was, okay, now focus on your studies. It was really hurtful in the sense that something that I put out there that was very vulnerable to me wasn't acknowledged.
And my parents still don't know. In fact, today morning they were like, LGBTQ. Just out of nowhere, mom was like LGBTQ. And then I put question mark, question mark. She's like, my colleagues told me they are wrong. They are the worst. It was out of nowhere. And so it's hard, man. I'm saying.
My younger sister thinks that gender non-conforming people are a product of the internet and don't really exist outside of it. They are a product of internet discourse rather than that don't reflect onto the real world in any way, shape, or form. You know how in the US there's discourse on how trans people, knowing about trans people will make kids become trans somehow. Yeah, that's what my sister thinks, but of gay people and the internet.
So yeah, you as you know, the Reddit, like Reddit, I met people through that. We formed this group. We're talking about openly about queer things, and then we just talked about, and then okay, I slowly came to the realization that it's normal and not something which should be queer, cute.
How queerness is represented, like when you're talking about inner city and small town. Now you look at transgenders you meet on the train. I only meet transgender in the cities or in borderlands. Okay.
So I mean, whatever I ended up googling was kind of supporting what I used to think. Like, okay, the stereotypes I had in my mind, and like ultimately the algorithm is what you like. It's not just that what I'm searching. Ultimately, there are a lot of related things that make my algorithm the way it is. So ultimately, I'm getting the kind of answers that would actually aggravate the idea that I currently hold.
Most interesting recent meeting I had with a transgender person was there's a place called Budvale. When you're coming down the Eastern Ghats, Budvale to Venkatagiri, where the Ghats end, there are speed breakers, and at the speed breakers you find queer people, and this is where the truckers stop and all that. And I stopped, and they usually stop me, and I don't get afraid, and I see them like any other person. I look at them in the eye when I talk to them.
A tier 2 city, such as the one I grew up in, like the one that I'm from, which is very close to a tier 1 city, but isn't a tier 1 city in the sense that people don't like, there's not that much of an intermixing of culture happening. You aren't really exposed to the Hijra community as much. You aren't exposed to a lot of these communities because the city itself doesn't have a new identity of itself in this age. And I feel like that might have also contributed a lot, the lack of exposure, sort of.
You're trans.
I find this perplexing that heterosexual men have this more compared to women, that like this LGBT community is farce and like they're overly vocal or like they're too loud.
In my experience, I felt that small town queer people really get more out of life when they go to the city because they get acceptance. They also use anonymity to their advantage, and they have nominal queer lives. I felt some of the most, I don't know, again, I'll have to go back to them and ask them if they're really happy, but I felt that they found themselves and that they're very happy with the way they were able to live and explore their queer identity.
People living in a tier 1 city would have much more exposure to events, to talks, to like access a community. And I don't think my city has had much of that.
Living in a metropolitan city often lets you experience a lot more things than someone who's living in just a city or a town or a village. Because I have cousins that are from us, like in my native place, and they are not as open to, like, say, queerness or basically anything that goes against traditional or conservative. So, yeah, I think, yeah, living in Bangalore did play a role, especially because, like, Nama Pride and all of that.
was such a huge thing in my school. I don't know if it was in other schools, but it was just like a if you clap on a Friday, you are trans. A lot of people, like you would clap on a Friday and people would just look at you.
So, I mean, to give an example using the all gender washrooms and just a you know cautionary note here that I only joined here last year, so I don't know what all discussions happened before March. But I know for a fact that this demand essentially came from the students, and it took some time to get it implemented, of course. And I think pandemic was also one of the reasons. Not students not being on campus was also the reason. But by the time they, you know, uh, OSL had accepted the demand, and I know that Priyanka, who was the director at that time, she was working on it. But I think you also need to just changing the board of a signage doesn't really make it a all gender washroom, right? So one also needs to do a lot of other things, making sure that the infrastructure inside the washroom is right. And I think nobody had thought about all those things. Um, but student protests happened, and this was another demand that was raised uh, during the protests. And after that, many faculty also came out in support of this demand, especially a group of trans non-binary faculty wrote a letter about the requirement for these washrooms. And I think that letter was really instrumental because how in academia everything becomes a discussion, and everyone wants to put out their views. So of course there were views of all kinds, but I think when the letter came out, it was a very important thing. And then there were some other important perspectives that were also brought in. For instance, there was somebody who raised the question of training the or sensitizing the housekeeping staff, and as to why this is happening. So the whole thing about not just changing the signage, but also making sure that there is some conversation around it, sensitizing the housekeeping staff, training them why this is happening, why is it important, how the signage will be, and how we will look into creating. I think all of that sort of became a much more nuanced exercise after some of the faculty members also wrote in support of the demand.
Actually, about transgender people. No, no, like where she gives the garden.
Okay. அவங்க வீட்ல அப்பா அம்மா யாருமே அவனை கேர் பண்ண மாட்டாங்க, மதிக்க மாட்டாங்க. அவன் நல்லா படிச்சிருக்கான், நல்லா படிப்பான். ஸோ அவன் பேச்சு டிஃப்ரெண்ட்டாக இருக்கும். நார்மலாக வேர் பண்ணுறது நார்மல் பாய்ஸ் தான் இருக்கணும். டிஃப்ரெண்ட்டாக இருக்கும். அதிகமாக கேர்ள்ஸ் போது அதிகமாக இருக்கும். ஆம்பளை பசங்களை கூட பேச மாட்டோம் எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சு. எப்போ பார்த்தாலும் எங்கள் பின்னாடியே சுற்றுவான், அக்கா அக்கா அக்கான்ட்டு. நிறைய லேடிஸ் என்னென்ன பண்ணுவாங்களோ, கோலம் போடுவான், வீட்டை பெருக்கிறது, சமைக்கிறது, வீட்டு வேலை ஃபுல்லாக செய்வான் அவங்க வீட்டில். ஆனால் யாரும் அவங்க அண்ணன் தம்பிங்க யாரும் மதிக்க மாட்டான். பறிச்சு தந்தால் வாங்கிக்குவாங்க. அவன் வேலைக்கு போனால் ஒத்துக்குவாங்க. ஆனால் அவனை வந்து என் அண்ணன் என் தம்பி அப்படின்னு யாருமே சொல்லுவாங்க. அவனை ரொம்ப வலிக்கிற மாதிரியே பண்ணுவாங்க.
Now, if I were to make queer mainstream, then queer would no longer be queer.